Ricky. As a long-lapsed classicist, it's absolutely wonderful to be here and to be part of this event. I say I'm long-lapsed, so the Iliad is rarely on my desk, and yet somehow it's always under my feet. It's part of the ground on which we move. The Iliad and the Odyssey remain among the foremost foundational texts of European literature. And as such, for most people, they are, like all foundations, far below the surface, trodden under, often ignored, yet implicitly relied on, and still, however vaguely, part of everyday discourse. The Trojan horse of computer science depends on the Homeric world, yet not quite on the words of the Iliad itself. The same is true of the Achilles heel. Our civilization still gestures towards that Homeric world, but if the gestures are to be more than empty ones, we need from time to time to return to the source, reminding ourselves just what this great ground base, the Iliad, means. Listening not just to its after echoes, but to its particular poetic music, to what is there, rather than what vaguely we associate with it. We need to go back like cleaners and keep the text spruced up, clear, and dust-free. We need to hear the Iliad afresh. To go to the Iliad is to return to a resonant point of origin, and a disturbing one. If the Iliad, like the Epic of Gilgamesh, reminds us that poetry is such an abiding and intimate, as well as a public art form, then it also carries with it over the millennia a voltage of disturbance. Recent examinations of appropriation of classical sources by resurgent right-wing extremists may be salutary, and no one can stand in Ian Hamilton Finlay's Little Sparta, just south of this Athens of the North, or can stand outside the imposing neoclassical Glyptothek in Munich where books once were burned, or can stand outside the Rosa Parks Museum of Troy University, Alabama, on the site of the former Empire Theatre, where Mrs. Parks was arrested for refusing to give up her seat on that Montgomery City bus, without reflecting on the relationship between violence, empire, and cultural power. Yet if the Iliad is undeniably a war poem, a poem of violence, when we listen to it again, it's also, at some moments at least, a poem of what seems pre-Virgilian tenderness and patient suffering. Nowhere more so than in books 6 and 24. It's those books, more than any others, which speak to me through contemporary poetry, not least when, like deep foundations suddenly exposed, they fuse with modern material, yet remain unchanged in some of the most moving texts that I've encountered. On this day, when a professor from Lyon, Christophe Cusset, invites people around the world to spend an hour hearing the Iliad, let's salute the old alliance, not just between Scotland and France, or between the Athens of the North and that of the South, but between poetry now and the foundational poetry of Homer. To take just one example, the contemporary French poet Michel de Guy, in his poem Passim, which I'll read soon in Clayton Eshelman's English translation, achieves pathos and disciplined power, not by rewriting the Homeric account of Hector's farewell to Andromache and Astyanax, but by embedding a version of Homer's lines within his De Guy's modern text. The huge number that represents the casualty figures of modern warfare is juxtaposed with a sense of grammatical conjugation and a hint of sunt lacrimae rerum, but the core of the poem, honest to a sense of distance in its translatorese, as well as honest to its sense of herd closeness, is unmistakably a passage straight from the Iliad's mouth. Passive. And they die, and you die, and we die, and she, he, it dies, and you again, and I die. Here often I am a little, like still a little, and I could cry at any moment. Was it 2,310,932, 724,864? It seemed to me that suddenly I was about to cry. When will we have done with? Speaking thusly, he was stretching toward his son, magnificent Hector, but the child at the breast of the nurse with a beautiful sash drew back crying. His father's looks terrify him. He is afraid of bronze and the horsehair crest, terrible at the top of the helmet. He sees it move. His father, his noble mother, burst out laughing. At once he took his helmet from his head, magnificent Hector, and he placed it on the ground, shining all over. Then his son, he kissed him and took him in his arms. He said, invoking Zeus and the other gods, "Just a moment more, executioner. It will be over in an instant. Just a moment more, executioner, because it shines the scene, because it goes to the eyes of the day moved to tears in the eyes that are going to leave all that were not even aware of it before. All that one will have to take away. The offer holds what we were deprived of. A God gathers the world to his arms that he did not know he must go back, as if there were nothing to it." This great poem of Michel de Guise alone signals why we are called back rightly to revoice the Iliad, to speak it back because it speaks to and through us still, and not just because we're in the Athens of the North, or because we're French or European, but because, like the father, the mother, and the child at that parting scene in Iliad 6, we are simply and complicatedly human.